Hey, shalom, man. This officer Canuck coming at you with another video, man. Today, racial segregation and concentrated poverty. We're going to look at how the United States created the ghettos, man. Let's get it.
Tell the homies I'm in heaven and they ain't got hoods.
Like many songs will tell you,
Bullet holes left in my peepholes.
the story of what housing and other living conditions look like for many Black Americans is pretty bleak, and that's by design. In addition to artists cataloging their very personal experiences,
When the landlord dissed us, no heat. Wonder why Christmas missed us.
it's been proven that the modern phenomenon of concentrated Black poverty was
Oh, let me see what that says. Intentional racial discrimination and segregation by the federal government as a principal cause of concentrated poverty in a response to Shield and Watcher. Damn, so basically they saying that basically systematic racism is what created the ghettos. Just like I just said, man. Let's go.
an intentional government-sponsored institution. This is in part why President Biden issued an executive order back in January, intended to right the historical wrongs Black folks have faced when it comes to housing and home ownership in this country. But first, let's take it back.
The dawn of the 20th century, African Americans in major cities lived scattered throughout the city. They weren't segregated particularly. It's only with the Great Migration of 6 to 7 million African Americans north and west escaping the South, the predominant response of the United States government and state and local governments to the Great Migration was to contain Black people in their own neighborhoods. And HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, was particularly a part of this role. But the precursors to HUD introduced and encouraged racially restrictive covenants, redlining of every major city where African Americans landed. The federal government was a sponsor of urban renewal, infamously called Negro removal by the great James Baldwin.
Urban renewal.
Wow.
Which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact.
That so-called urban renewal also included a federally sponsored interstate highway system, which was intentionally designed to mow through vibrant Black neighborhoods. Take Miami, for example. 2 highways, I-95 and I-395, bulldoze right through the predominantly Black and low-income Overtown neighborhood.
Damn, so what they saying is that the interstate highways in America, they designed them to be built directly in the path where there used to be black neighborhoods, Black cities, Black towns. So basically they destroyed the Black towns and built the highways right through them.
Previously called Colored Town during segregation.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development and the federal government writ large in the first 7 decades of the 20th century invested billions of dollars in racial segregation and concentrated poverty. Each time this country created a peculiar institution that subordinated Black people, slavery, Jim Crow, it created and dismantled it. They replaced it with another one. And the iconic Black ghetto, I don't use that as a pejorative, I use it as a descriptor, was a follow-on institution to slavery and Jim Crow. That's the legacy that...
Wow, she said the ghetto was a follow-on institution of slavery and Jim Crow. It's very interesting how she calls the ghetto a institution
that every new administration inherits, and the Biden administration has as well.
Today, I'm directing the Department of Housing and Urban Affairs and Urban Development to redress the historical racism in federal housing policies.
This executive order is just one of 4 signed by President Biden.
And the term is concentrated poverty, right? So now that I'm thinking about it, it's like the federal government used their HUD program, the Housing and Urban Development Program. They used that in concentrated poverty in certain areas where black people live. And that's how you have the housing projects. That's how you have the ghetto. That's how you have it. Because they redlined it, they drew out spots in the map, and they said this area right here is predominantly black. This is where we're going to concentrate the poverty. Meaning they did what? They took all of the resources out of that area, and then the people that lived in that area, the black people, they didn't give them access to the resources that they gave the other people with predominantly white neighborhoods. They didn't give them the same type of resources that they gave them. It's concentrated poverty. So now this area of the state, this particular area of the city is gonna be suffering poor and impoverished.
Designed to address racial equity in the United States. And while this progress is a step in the right direction, there's still a lot of harm to undo.
Segregation started coming down after the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which actually only got passed in the wake of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. In 1980, 8 out of 10 black people would have had to move in order to be evenly integrated within metropolitan areas. Half of black people who live in metropolitan areas still live in neighborhoods of high segregation. So we've had modest improvement, but
still live in areas of high segregation. That whole myth about integration and that we all came together is a lie, man. We're still segregated. The only thing that's integrated is where black people go and spend their money. Now we go and spend our money with white people, but we don't go sleep in a house next to white people. We don't go sleep in an apartment next to white people. We're still segregated, man.
Segregation persists. And
majority of our kids don't go to school with white people.
And economic segregation has spiked since 1970. The so-called American dream is only working for a relatively small slice of the population that can afford to buy their way into what I call gold standard neighborhoods that have the best of everything. And
what's crazy is these people she's talking about, that this small percentage of the population that can afford to live this gold standard, these be the main ones talking about, it's not the same anymore. That America is not the same, that racism is in the past. These be the same people, man. It's crazy.
Everybody else struggles, and the black poor struggle the most.
So what happens now? Well, some advocates are hopeful.
Home applauds this executive order for really focusing on historical patterns of racial segregation and discrimination in housing,
while others remain cautiously optimistic. Here's Professor Cashin's suggestion.
I don't take credit for this, but I applaud it. There should be an equity analysis. The federal government spends so much money, it should track who's getting it by neighborhood, and it should pursue racial equity in the distribution of resources. There's been a lot of movement at the local level on this. For the example of Baltimore, they did an equity analysis and found that they were spending 4 times as much money in majority white neighborhoods as in majority black ones.
So that basically that equity analysis that she's talking about. So basically what she's saying is how they're using all the money and all the resources into predominantly white neighborhoods. They need to do an equity analysis to see how much it is money and its resources that they put in the white neighborhood and then divide it equally.
I think we're in this moment where people are waking up, sad to say, because of the slow execution of George Floyd, to the realities of systemic racism. And I believe there is an ascending majority multiracial coalition that wants something better than a separate unequal nation that overinvests in some neighborhoods and disinvests and preys upon people in other neighborhoods. I'm hopeful, but you can never stop working for and organizing for the country you want. generations more radical and less tired than me. There's always another generation coming.
If they were really serious about this whole equality BS that they talk about, man, then the same way that they created these government programs that gave all the resources to white people and took the resources out of the black people's communities, then they need to create government programs that take the resources out of the white communities and put all the resources to the black communities. That's the only way that you fix it, man. You have to reverse that's been done. And the way you reverse what's been done is to do the opposite. This is what you did in order to build up the white communities and create the ghettos. Now, in order for you to erase the ghetto or remove the ghetto, then you need to reverse it and do what you did to the white communities and the black communities. Create the programs, create the HUD programs and all of that, and be racist towards white people so that our communities can grow. If you want to keep it real, that's real equality, man. Other than that, it's just talk.
All jokes aside, you know how niggas be like, I'm this and that for life, this and that for life.
You don't receive her what? Her plan in the ISUPK. We ain't worried about the coronavirus. How many of us do you see with masks on? Right. How many of us do you see out here afraid with gloves on?
140 for the rebel.
The world turned its back on me. I'm a cripple. We got soldiers, he got soldiers, but I got different.
Don't sit here and talk shit like what's gonna pop up, what's gonna do this. If you're gonna cross the line, cross the fucking line. Otherwise, get the fuck out of here. Run.
Please, forgive me for the time that I did. If rank is given, have your respect to your prince.
Nosotros somos una nación. Nosotros somos la misma gente. Nosotros.
El mundo sepa que nuestros hermanos negros y hermanos moranos